So just before we start, just to go over the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once outside of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you do need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. And just to remind you all to make sure your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent, please. Apologies, read any apologies?
I haven't received any.
I've received some from Councillor Pomfret. Going on to agenda item 3, I'd just like to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of July 2018 is indicated at page 4. Can I confirm these are an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest other than those indicated on the notes? No, thank you. I'm not aware of any public consultation, do you know? No. So moving on to agenda item 6, determination of unclassified films under the Licensing Act 2003, delegation to officers. If we could all turn to page 10 of the report.
Thank you. The first purpose of the report is the proposal that officers determine the classification of unclassified films in accordance with the British Board of Film Classification, and I've left for distribution the set of notes from that, the classification list. And the recommendation is that, having considered the report and the proposed procedure submitted by officers, we recommend a film previously unclassified by the BBFC be determined by licensing officers, unless the agreed process requires an application to be referred to a licensing subcommittee. The legislation covering this is under the Licensing Act 2003. And Section 20 of the Act provides that where a premises licence or a club premises certificate authorises the exhibition of a film or films, the licence must include a condition requiring the admission of children to films to be restricted in accordance with recommendations given either by a body designated under Section 4 of the Video Recordings Act 1984, specified in the licence, and that currently only the British Board of Film Classification, or by the licensing authority itself. The public exhibition of films on licensed premises must therefore either be classified by the BBFC or authorised by the licensing authority under the powers of the Licensing Act. The circumstances when the licensing authority may classify a film, the licensing authority may be requested to authorise the showing of an unclassified film within its borough, and usually this will be done for, such as a film festival covering a specified period of time, a one-off screening of a film, or a trailer for a film. The licensing authority may also be requested to authorise a film that has already been classified by the BBFC when a distributor of a film wishes to appeal against the decision of the BBFC and request that the licensing authority reclassify or authorise the film for a local screening with recommendations on age restrictions. Or an independent party may request that the licensing authority authorises the film for local screening, again with recommendations on age restrictions. We do have a current process as detailed in Section 5 of the report, and this is what happens now, is that the licensing section, upon receiving a request to authorise the showing of an unclassified film, will refer it to the licensing services officer, who views the film, writes a report detailing who has submitted the request and why, the proposed date for the showing of the film, and a brief summary of the film. The licensing services officer then gives a recommendation as to what the BBFC classification the film falls into. A licensing subcommittee hearing is then arranged by the said licensing services officer, And at the hearing, the film is viewed again, but this time by the licensing councillors in the form of a subcommittee, three councillors. And it's considered alongside the report and the guidance. The subcommittee then determine the classification of the film or refuse the film to be shown, taking into account all the information. The viewing of the film alone can take 2 to 3 hours. The subcommittee may then grant the request in one of the following ways: grant with approval given for the film to be shown to all ages, grant subject to special conditions or restrictions as they think fit, or refuse the film to be shown, as in all council meetings, either full or subcommittees. They must give reasons for the decision that they have made. What we're proposing is that a minimum of 2 licensing officers will view the film, a minimum of 3 if it is thought the film may cause offence through sexual or violent content, and classify it in accordance with the current BBFC guidelines. The officers will record the certification granted and give reasons for reaching their decision and notify the applicant of their decision. However, the matter will be referred to the licensing subcommittee if officers wish to depart from the BBFC classification to allow younger viewers to watch a film, fail to agree on the classification, wish to refuse a licence to show a film, or decline to process the application. And again, if an applicant disagrees with the officer's decision, they will have the right to appeal, and that would go before a licensing subcommittee. And as I stated, the recommendation from us is that the proposed procedure is that it moves that licensing officers be given, that the decision is delegated to officers in the first instance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So you've heard the report is printed. Any member have any comments?
I think it's fairly common sense. Currently it looks like work is happening twice.
Can I just point out, it's often pointed out to me by the legal section, is there should be something moved and seconded before any debate takes place.
Happy to move the report.
Seconded.
Any comment? Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. It's an interesting report in as much as, I guess it's not so much the issue as about whether we give more delegation to officers, because it's only a slight shift from the current process. But I wonder why it's come in this manner and what alternatives there may have been, i.e. it may have been referred as a single member decision, as some of the things have been. My own personal view on it as an elected member is I'm elected to make decisions on behalf of people and not to just give everything as delegated authority to officers. And in saying that, and with the greatest of respect to anybody, whether it be officers or members or the public, I think in circumstances like this, I don't think anybody has got any more knowledge about it than anybody else. So for it to be determined by officers only, I worry about. I'm also concerned about how it's been arrived at. Why 2 officers, not 1 officer? Why a 3rd officer if 2 officers can't make their mind up? Where do we stop? Do we go to 4 or 5? It's a pretty rare thing when we get a film classification come to us, and although it's only a slight shift, personally, I believe the way we currently do it now is the correct way. It puts the decision making into the hands of the members. Thanks, Chair.
Can I have some information? I can understand and appreciate what Councillor Hancock is saying, and as you say, it is a slight shift from the current process. I think why it has come to this point now is that in the last 12 months we've had 2 requests for classified films, unclassified films to be determined. and I have got a third one now waiting for determination. The arranging of a hearing for a subcommittee is always a very time restricted process. We have, once the request comes in for us to view a film, an officer, like I said, has to view it first of all in order to put the report together, and then I have a short window in which to get a subcommittee together and for the film to be reviewed again. And I think possibly from an officer's point of view, that is what has led us to make this request. I can always go down the route of a hearing. Like I say, obviously it will be determined by yourselves which way it goes. But it is a lengthy process of watching the film and then having to watch it again in order for it to be determined. And an officer is looking at it in the same terms as you would have to, in line with the BBF's guidelines. All I can say is that I think this is going to be a more common event. I think we're, especially with our theatre in Nuneaton, which is the one that is promoting it, they are wanting to support local producers, local filmmakers. So that is why they are having these one-off showings. And it is the one-off screening of a film that we've already had. The last two, and certainly the third one that's coming in, is in that, falls under that category, the one-off showing of a film. And I think that's what's prompted us. And I did some research, and it's probably a split across the country. Some councils go along with the subcommittee approach, but some councils have delegated it to officers. It is a very individual local authority determination which way they want to go. And obviously, as an officer, we will be guided by yourselves.
Thanks, Julian. Any other member?
I think,
Councillor
thank you, Chair. I think with the industry in question, I mean, I suspect that if they do apply for this, I mean, they want a speedy process, and I think it's, I don't want to try and stop them from, coming into our local area and whatnot. So I think Julian's reasoning behind this is quite good, and I think I've got every confidence in the licensing team to do the job right. And yeah, so I'm quite happy to move this report.
So we would, like we've stated in the report, I think when Councillor Hancock said about, why two officers, it could be just one officer. I mean, it's only me that watches it before I bring the report and, see how it meets the classification, the guidelines from the BBFC. But we just thought it fairer if two officers saw it. I understand that you could, then say why two, not why three, we can go on, but obviously if you thought it needed more, but bearing in mind we are a very small licensing team as well, we can only get to a certain point of the number of officers viewing it. Whether you wanted it to be a senior, I mean, I supervise the section, as you know, and then there's a principal licensing officer. Whether you wanted it to be a hierarchy that way, I don't know. That would be for you to say,
Councillor Ponder.
Yeah, you mentioned about the time, about the council time, when you're arranging meeting is difficult. But always you can email to maybe 7 or 8 in the licensing committee, any two can be available. And second thing is, if all the powers are given to delegates or officers, then if anything come from the public, because then no elected member is involved, why you pass this film, should not be passed, then it will be more problem for the elected, not elected members, it will be more for the problem for the officers. So that's why thinking that if elected member can be, if they are available, then it should be included.
Yes, I think that's a very valid point. You know, you are here to represent the community. I mean, I could suggest that possibly, rather than 2 officers, whether we could have an officer and a councillor, and that would, I believe we wouldn't have to then go down the route of having the strict timescales of a subcommittee hearing, which we do have to meet certain notification dates then when it's viewed. But if it was a less formal process, that, as I say, we could have a councillor and an officer. I don't know whether that would be of any
Councillor
benefit to anybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, the point that I was making about it being common sense is that at the minute it seems a little bit inefficient in that the film has to be watched twice.
Yes.
And if we are talking about quite lengthy films, like the officers are doing it and then the councillors are having to do it to then agree with what the officers have said. So you could maybe combine that process and have a panel of 2 or 3 people that is made up of officers and elected members. So then you've got...
What we've got now.
But it's having to be watched twice at the minute, isn't it? Because the officers are watching it first to produce a report, and then it's come into a subcommittee. So it's almost combining those 2 things.
Yes, because my understanding is, and I would have to get it checked out, is that if it was, the subcommittee is a very formal process. Is it, like I say, you know, there's notifications and guidance under the Licensing Act how and when we have them. If it was delegated to an officer and a councillor, that would be watching it they would be watching it together, just that one instance, and then putting their determination. But I suppose that would mean, again, what I'd have to do is to contact all the council. It wouldn't be me picking the licensing section, picking a councillor. It would go out to the new councillors on licensing committee to see anybody that would be prepared to do it. But I don't believe that we would have to fit in with that subcommittee process. But again, I would that would need checking out.
It would either be the subcommittee
Or
another process that you're actually suggesting
suggesting.
the committee are approving.
Yeah, but whether that would, from what councillors have raised about the concerns taken away from councillors entirely, whether that would be, I don't know whether a compromise is the right word to use, but it's another suggestion that I could, when we have one in, like I've just said, I've got one now that is, they're wanting to be scheduled in November. Now, if we go down the route of subcommittees, that's fine, but I will be writing to you all in the next week asking for availability to sit on a subcommittee within the 2 weeks following. And that is the process now. But, you know, it works. The process works, but it's availability as well, you know, and like we've said, it is going through it twice. But obviously as officers, we're open to
Yeah, can I just ask one question?
Yes,
Has there
Councillor.
been any occasion when you've not been able to get a subcommittee?
I've struggled, councillor, on quite a few
No.
occasions. I've always ended
Sorry,
up with one.
Chair, I didn't ask if they'd struggled to get one. I said, have you been able to get subcommittees to be able to do this
Yes,
process?
I have.
Thank you.
Yes, I have.
I'm happy to support the proposal as written, partly for the practical reasons that Councillor Evans pointed out, and partly because it seems to me that film classification is more a technocratic thing than a political decision, and because it makes very clear that if there is a controversy or a political disagreement, it comes to the subcommittee anyway. So, as is my understanding, quite a lot of regulatory decisions get taken by officers anyway, and then if they're controversial or difficult, they go to councillors, so I don't see why it shouldn't be any different.
Under the Licensing Act legislation, which this falls under, all of the applications, unless we receive representations against them, officers grant. It's like, and with the other types of licences and applications that we deal with, it is so set up that they will be granted and dealt with by officers unless there is something brought to our attention or somebody wanted to raise, and that's where we stop them. And they're always brought before yourselves or referred to yourselves. An officer can't make the decision to refuse to amend. We can only go with the guidance.
So something's been moved and seconded. Any other member?
No, I was going to say I'd second the amendment. No, the report.
Any other member? Okay, so something's been moved and seconded, so we're going to go to the vote on that. All those in favour? And against? And that's carried.
Thank you.
And I'm not aware of any other items. No. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, councillors.